Hey guys, this is Naut with Naut Gaming, and today I'm here with Mordicant, and we're going to be doing a neutral card review for draft. A lot of you guys have been asking for this, so let's get right into it. How are we doing today, Mordicant?
I'm doing good. I'm ready to review some cards.
Alright, well, let's start off with this first one, Census. If adjacent to a friendly minion, attack hits all adjacent enemies. What do you think about this card in draft?
I think there's a couple important things to note about it. Friendly unit also includes structures. So if you have a census up in your front line and you're holding a blade forge or something, if you're Nuwa, you can drop that down. It'll count. Even though blade forge also counts as a spell for cards like Imperial Soldier. So it's good to know. But that being said, I feel like the cleave effect is not super powerful on a 2/4, except for in the very, very early game. So I would probably put this card at like a 2.5 out of 5.
A 2.5 out of 5? Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. Unless you have a huge amount of pump effects, I don't think this card's getting any better than that.
Yeah,
So,
maybe if you drafted a Wind Demon or two.
2.5 out of 5. That sounds good to me. Well, let's move on to the next one. We have Argus here. Whenever a friendly god enters the battlefield, draw a card.
Well, obviously it's going to be super dependent on the rest of your deck. The 1/3 body for 3 is not great, so if you don't have very much synergy going on, it's probably a 1.5 or 2 stars. But if you're playing Zeus and you have a lot of gods, or if you've just drafted an abnormally large amount of gods, then it can certainly get you through your deck if you keep it in the back line. So maybe if you have, say, 8 gods or more in your deck, I would put it at like a 3, but I wouldn't go higher than that.
Gotcha. Yeah, no. I actually dislike this card quite a bit in draft. I rated it very low, probably around like a 2. I just don't see this card. Most of the time, you're never going to have enough gods to make this valuable. And if you see this early in the draft, it's almost impossible to pick it up. Next card is going to be Armored Behemoth. Whenever this unit takes damage, +3 attack. So, what do we think about this one?
It's got a really good body. Just the 8 health is very solid in this game. I don't think there's anything that has more than 8 base health at all. And the fact that it's only 5 mana is like a pretty solid mid game minion. If you're playing China, you can ping it yourself. Um, there's a lot of flexibility you can have, and it also helps you stop the anti aggro by cleaning up their small minions, and then it can trade up as well. So there's a lot of things you can do with this card. I'd probably put it at like a 3.5, but at the same time, if you need a big unit now for 5 mana, this is not going to cut it. So you need to be aware not to draft too many of these.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think in Nua particularly, it might be a 3.5. I think everywhere else, it's probably around 2.5 to 3. So that's where I would place this card. Uh, sure, if you can get some hits on it, it can get pretty large and out of control. But most of the time, if it takes a couple hits, it's gonna be dead. So
I don't think it's about getting out of control so much as it trades with like 2 cards usually, if not more, if you can get good trades. So it's more about the value than about the making it a big dude and killing your opponent.
gotcha. All right, let's move on to the next one. Baboon.
Baboon is solid.
Yep. So guys,
I,
this is a guard beast.
Those are some great keywords right there.
Yes, it is.
So the fact that it's ranged on top of that is that much better. Baboons are just really hard for your opponent to deal with. 7 health is, again, a lot. So unless they're going to decay your Baboon, which doesn't feel great for them because it's not very threatening, or unless they're going to execute it, it's going to chill in your back line, stop them from moving up, stop them from attacking your core, stop them from getting chip damage in, and it's just a very powerful effect. So I would probably put this at a 4.
I would agree with that. Baboon is crazy good at stopping aggressive decks from killing you in arena, and being that there's so many aggressive Odin decks out there, taking this card seems great almost every time.
And not only that, Baboon has 3 power range, which means it can move up after you've gained board control or stabilized, and it can trade with all of their range dudes, because most range dudes don't have more than 3 health. And it can do that profitably since it has 7 defense. I think it's very overstated for what it is.
No, I would agree with you. All right, let's move on to the next. We have Basilisk here.
Not in draft. I won't do it.
You won't
I
do
won't
it?
do it.
I
2/2
think
body is just not enough.
I think this
If it
card.
was a 2/3, like for sure, all day. but like all it does is like maybe buff a minion or two. If you've got like 8 or 9 other beasts, I still wouldn't take this card
No?
because the extra 1 attack on your guys is just not enough. Even unless you have like 3 hyenas that you need to be buffing on turn 2 or your turn 2 with 3 mana, then like maybe, but that's like the only time. Give this guy
Gotcha.
like a 1.5.
You're giving us a 1.5?
Seriously,
Yeah, I think that's
the extra
probably
one
pretty
damage reduce
fair.
doesn't matter.
This card isn't very good, guys. Every once in a while, it'll help a beast out to get going, but most of the time, it's not going to be alive long enough for your other beasts to even start existing. It's slightly
Or
better in like Nua or wherever, where you might have a manifold blade and where you want to be able to have something to play on your 2-drop because sometimes just make a blade isn't that good. But I don't like this card. I wouldn't take it in draft very often.
if it gave your friendly beast +0/+1, that'd be great. But the extra attack doesn't really help, especially in a game like Hand of the Gods, where if your minion's not going to trade profitably, you can just kind of run him away for a turn or two. Um, this guy is generally not going to cause any of your beasts to trade up where they wouldn't before. So the effect's not that great.
1.5 sounds good to me.
I give 1.5.
Blademaster. Now, guys, keep in mind the Blademaster, he's been reduced to a 4/6, and they've removed his war cry. So, what do you think about this?
Well, the first thing I think is that it says Warcry on there twice, which actually means charge. So it still has charge, and now it's a 4/6 or 7. It used to be a great stabilizing tool against aggro because you'd get a little bit of a heal, you'd remove one of their dudes, and it would stick around and probably trade with another dude. And now you can still remove a dude, and it will probably still stick around and trade with another dude, but the 7/6 actually really hurts against things like Terra, and against things like Fury, where if your opponent has a Fury on board and they have board control, you're in a really bad spot, and you want your Blademaster to stick around. Also, losing the heal hurts a lot too. Now I think I would probably only draft this card. I maybe like a 2.5. I would have to have really bad other options because
Yeah.
in Arena, even if you're drafting aggro, you still want to draft value cards. You just want to draft like cheaper value cards so that you can snowball your opponent because you can't reliably go face and get there since your deck's going to be much more inconsistent than a constructed deck.
Yeah, no, I'm going to agree with you on this one. This card now, the changes they've done to it, isn't very good. I think that you're going to have a lot hard time finding 2 epics that are worse than this card to take in your drafts, guys. So I would give this probably like a 2, 2.5. Yeah, no problem. This card isn't as good as it used to be, that's for sure. Brontis. How do we feel about Brontis?
I like him. Um, Sometimes he's just a 4/4 for 3, and that's very solid, like very strong. So if you can get that, then you definitely should be doing it. That said, you need to have the gods to support him. So if you're early in the draft, he's a little bit risky, but at the same time, he's still a 3/3 for 3, which is not bad. He fights Chaos Spawn and profitably. He fights every 2-drop profitably, except for like maybe Hyena, but even then he trades. And if you can buff him, then he's great. The only downside to this card is that if you don't have a god, he's worse than Doom Speaker, right? Which is the vanilla stat stick. So he's not even that much worse though. The 1 point of health matters, but if you can keep him alive for 2-3 turns, you're probably gonna hit a god on turn 4 or 5 if you have a reasonable amount of them in your deck. So I'd give him like a 3, maybe 3.5.
I would agree with that assessment. I talk about taking Doom Speaker all the time on stream. That card is great. A 3/4. He often trades up. He'll often crush 2 minions at the same cost as him before going down. So Brontis, I mean, you definitely want to have some gods with him, but if you ever get that off, it's great. Easy 3 at least.
Yeah.
Next card is going to be Brute.
Brute's very powerful. If your opponent doesn't have the removal spell and they don't like have overwhelming control of the board, Brute's great. The fact that he has Protect 2 means that he can basically just stomp over your opponent's whole army of smaller minions and not care. So he definitely is very powerful, especially for 1 card. You can get a lot of value out of him. On the other hand, if you haven't been playing a strong game up until when you drop Brute, your opponent could just still have some removal. They could have like a stun, trade into him a bunch. Um, they can just decay him. They can just execute him. He's not the Protect 2 doesn't prevent spell damage either. So there are ways to deal with a Brute, but if you're not immediately going to die when you play him, he should be very good at helping you win back the board, or at least winning back control of your side of the board. If your opponent has a bunch of ranged units and they just run away, hide behind their core for a little bit, it's going to be hard for you to move your Brute up, but it gives you time to develop and like work with your board state. So I'd probably put him at a 3.5. However, on the other hand, he's also very expensive, and I wouldn't want to draft more than 2. More than 1 is maybe a stretch.
I personally love this card. I think Protect 2 is a broken keyword. I don't know who came up with that idea, but if your opponent, for instance, has a bunch of 3/4 archers, they don't do anything to him. He walks right up into them and starts killing their range units. This guy here can often be a solution to cards that are hard to deal with. Stuff like Stone Guardian, who only hits for 3, it's only going to take 1 damage off this guy every time. So you actually can take the time to walk up and just get that card gone and deal with it in draft. So as far as I'm concerned, 7/6 for 7, alright stat line. But that Protect 2 ability, guys, is insane. I'm going to give him like a 3 to a 4, Most of the time when I see this card in comparison to a lot of other commons of high value, probably gets a 3.5.
Yeah, especially the fact that he's a rarity free means there's not a whole lot of other cards that are going to be competing with him. If you're playing Bologna, is Dishonored free or common?
Both. Free and commons get mixed sometimes.
Oh, free and commons get mixed. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if you're playing Bologna and you see Dishonored over, I would definitely take it over Brute. Outside of that, if you don't have a good top end, he'll do it for you.
Yeah. And we are now at the Bull Demon King. So guys, this guy has King attacks, deal damage to all adjacent enemies, and he's a beast. How do you feel about this card?
The beast tag on him I don't think is particularly relevant. I think the only thing that matters for is basically Manifold Blade. If you still have a Hyena, then like if you're coining this guy out on 4 or something, and you went like Hyena into Harpy into Bull Demon King, like then it's a buff. Strangely enough, this guy actually plays real well with Basilisk, but he doesn't have an immediate impact on the board, and his effect doesn't trigger when he's being traded into. So unless you can play him safely and protect him for the turn or 2 that you need to get him in a position, I feel like there's better things you can be doing with your epic choice in a draft. So I'd probably put him at like a 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, considering that he is an epic and that you're going to be dealing with a bunch of other epics in that slot that I think are probably more powerful, 2.5 sounds really good.
Like,
I will say, every once in a while you get that cleave or you get that wind demon with him, and he's basically insane. But outside of that, he's hard to get into position before it matters. Your opponents see that come down, they look at solutions to deal with him, which can be nice. But at the same time, if you're playing him into a board that you don't have control over, he's not going to help you. So,
I think if you're something to note though is if you have Runestone of Ire in your deck and you're playing Odin, then like his value goes way up.
For sure.
Because getting that cleave out of nowhere is absolutely amazing.
All right, and let's go on to the next card. Carrier Behemoth. How do you feel about this card?
I really don't like this guy. I know you've got a soft spot for him, but my feeling on Carrier Behemoth is like a 1.5.
Gotcha.
You describe this card.
All right, guys.
Go for it.
So this guy is a 1/8, so he's pretty large-bodied. Whenever a friendly minion dies, deal 1 damage to the enemy summoning stone. I wouldn't actually rate him super highly. I'd say like a 1 to a 2, probably a 2.
Oh, okay, sure.
There are times when there's not any other good rares to take, and he is going to fit nicely into your 4 slot. If you take him in decks like Odin, or you take him in decks like Apiuj, he gets a lot better. Simply because you have that 1/1 every turn that can actually kind of trigger to start dying, and you start getting that damage in, and that can put a time clock on your opponent's life total. But I wouldn't say he's insane, and it's a really slow clock at that. So,
like, if you have him in play for 4 turns and 5 guys die, if you had just played a 2/8 instead of a 1/8, you would still be losing damage playing this carrier Behemoth, even though you got the effective trigger 5 times. Like that's terrible. It's
I mean, he holds the line,
ah.
right? In like a mirror
I
match,
mean,
and like against
not
Odin Odin.
really. Look, if they run up with like a 4/4, like an Uguay, a different 4 drop, any vanilla 4 drop, right, is going to be like at least a 4/4 stat line if it's reasonable. That thing is going to go to a 4/2. Your guy's going to die. You're going to lose a whole card for half a card, and the effect is completely negligible. Like, if you want to get used out of the effect, you have to play in the backline. Then his body doesn't matter, and the effect isn't strong enough to warrant playing him in the backline anyway. I really, really don't like this card.
No, I think that's all fair. You know, guys, this one is a if there's nothing else better,
Yeah,
but
but
most of the time there will
but
be.
if there's not, then I'm sorry.
You know. All right, let's move on to
This
the
guy, on
next
the other
Chow
hand,
Chow Fang. How do you feel about melee immune units?
melee immune is awesome. Like range is already uh, a much smaller percent of the cards that exist. So just because of that, it's much more likely that your opponent is going to have more melee dudes and range dudes. If you have any amount of spells to back him up, if they do get a range guy down, you can kill him with a spell. Your Chow Fang can just run all over the board. Sometimes your opponent plays a Brute, and you just want to block it for a couple turns. Sometimes your opponent plays a Fury, and you just want to block it for a couple turns and kill it. Sometimes your opponent just has some big guys, and they can't do anything to your Chow Fang. Especially if you tried to play a Stone Thrower earlier, they had to use a removal spell there. Maybe they're a little light on removal. It is draft after all. This guy can totally just run all over the battlefield and apply pressure wherever you want, mostly with impunity.
You know, I think Chow
So
Fang is an absolute stellar four.
yeah,
In
definitely
draft,
four
in
star.
particular, he is so powerful. Um, a lot of times, guys, people don't have enough removal in draft, and their decks aren't necessarily balanced between range and melee. So when you have him out there, there are games that he'll just win it by himself, where your opponent just doesn't have an answer for him. They can't play anything. He's at their core, and all they have in hand are a bunch of melee drops that will literally just die to this guy. So I like him a lot. I would pick him very highly.
And the important part about him being at their core there is not that he's like getting 3 damage in a turn, because that's not really that much. The important part is that he stops your opponent from being able to do anything at all without just completely losing value, and that allows you to continue playing your stuff, building up your board, keeping pressure on your opponent. So that's the real important part of this card.
I think a 4 rating is pretty fair.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next guide. Chaos Spawn.
I kind of almost want to give this guy a 4 too.
I don't hate that idea, guys.
I at the very
Silence
least a
right
three
now
and
is
a
at a
half.
premium.
Yeah.
You know, he's one of the best ways to deal with any of the Hydras. He's one of the best ways to deal with Stone Guardian. Is basically a removal card. Um, you know, it doesn't kill
It,
your opponent's guy, but it makes it so that your opponent's guy doesn't kill you.
and importantly, he's a removal card from a neutral set, whereas almost all the other removal cards are spells, and spells are Pantheon only. So he is a neutral. He's a removal card that fits in any deck, which is super useful.
Yeah, there's very few common to base cards that I would ever take over Chaos Spawn, guys. You know, once you have 2 or 3 of these in your deck, maybe consider something else. But he's just so good.
I don't know if I want to
Um,
go to 3, but
yeah,
after 2, I would like Brute's also at the free slot, right? So if I have 2 Chaos Bonds and I see a Brute, I'm taking the Brute. And but before that, I'm probably taking the Chaos Bond, as good
yeah.
as Brute is.
All right. So, guys, we're gonna move on to Chieftain. Whenever another friendly unit dies, gain +2/+2. He is a 6/5 body.
That's he does a lot of work. Even in the decks that aren't Norse or Mayan, he still gets a lot of work done. The fact that he gets +2/+2 instead of +2/+1 is a really big deal. There's a similar effect in another card game that we will not mention. That's I think much weaker because it's only +2/+1. Um, but even if you only trade 2 guys in, suddenly he's a 10/9. And a
Yeah,
10/9 is a really, really big body. I think Chieftain's easily a 3.5, maybe a 4. It depends what else you're picking him against, but I wouldn't want to take more than 2.
I think 1 or 2 is perfectly fine. Is where you want to be at with them at the most. You know, if you're Norse or Mayan, obviously, you know you can be pushing that too. That's fine. the thing about him is when you get to play him, guys, that's the turn that you get to make your trades. You don't
Yeah.
want him to sit on the board and like not get the value that he's there for. You want to take your smaller guys, trade up with them if you can, and then you end up with a powerhouse on board. When you're playing Mayans or you're playing Norse, you get that hero power too, which is going to make this guy go out of control. So, very strong card. I think 3.5 to 4 is probably pretty fair for him in the rare slot. There are, a good chunk of rares from classes that you'd want to take over him, so probably around a 3. But yeah, very powerful card.
Still think 3.5.
Yeah.
I think any rare that you want to take over him is probably going to be a 4. So we'll stick with 3.5.
All right. Clay Soldier.
he's one of those cards that I feel like falls in the 2.5 slot just because I don't want to pick him, but there's times when I really don't want to pick any other stuff either. So you just have to take him. Unfortunately, if your opponent has any amount of range dudes, this guy can be very punishing for you to play. On the upside, if they don't, or if you have some way to give him haste or charge, then he can certainly do some work. Or maybe you're playing Nuwa and you've got like 2 Crescent Blades in hand, or you have 1 and you can hero power. You can just drop him down and essentially bomb 2 of your opponent's creatures that are at your core. So there's some application to him. There's a lot of cards that I would pick over him. However, there are some times when you just have bad choices and you have to take Clay Soldier.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the only time I've ever taken Clay Soldier is when the other options are just abysmal. I don't like this card. I would stick him at a 2. I mean, the option is like blade him twice, right? Like use 2 of your hero powers on your card to make it usable. Doesn't sound sweet to me.
But when you do that, it's very useful.
I mean, it can be. It's split between enemies, so sometimes they won't even die if they have enough guys at your core. It's a tough one. I don't like this guy a lot.
If they're going on your core and they don't have any ranged units, then he also does a lot of work.
I mean, that's kind of be fair, but range units are at a premium.
Well, yes.
Alright, let's move on to the next card. Decrepit Foeman. So I'm going to start off by saying, Afterlife spawned 2 Decrepit Fractures, which are also 1/1 ranged. I didn't like this card at first, but the more I've played with it, the more I've gotten, a lot of value out of this card. He really can help you shut down some of the more aggressive decks like Norse, where they run in, you trade them off with a 1/1, and then you can trade them off for 2 more 1/1s if you want, or you can keep them back and just ping over the line. There can be times when it's correct for you to make the trade, and there's going to be times when it's correct for your opponent to make the trade. But either way, pretty solid card. I don't really normally like to take 1/1s for 3. That's not insane value, but his Afterlife effect is actually pretty decent. So I'm going to give this card a 2.5.
Yeah, okay. 2.5 sounds fair. It's not a card I love to take. Even if you were to get all the stats up front, then it's still only a 3/3 for 3 ranged, which is
really
a little
good.
better than average. But if you look at, I mean, I guess it's in the rare slot, so we can't think about any of the rare range dudes like Hao Yi or Sol or Sagittarius or Scotty. We can't think about any of those at the slot for draft. So total of 3/3 stats with range is pretty good.
Right.
But
I mean, you're gonna compare him to like the Zombie Maker, the 1/3.
Yeah,
and
Zap Scout,
and the other equivalent for spells, the Pinger.
Imperial Bowman.
Yeah, I think so. Right. So he's I think he's probably pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I think 2.5 is fair.
Those cards. Yeah.
Maybe 3.
All right, let's move on.
Kind of depends what your deck looks like and what kind of curve you have going on.
Departed Warrior, Afterlife, draw card. I do want to just say, guys, there is a direct competitor to this card. In
Elder Harpy.
Elder Harpy, exactly. Thank you. And when that card comes into play, it draws you a card immediately, and also has the only tag that matters as far as neutrals go, Beast. So
yeah,
he's worse than that card in almost every way.
I'm not sure what they were thinking, unless they later on create a card that can trigger a friendly's afterlife without killing it. That's the only time this guy is better than Elder Harpy ever. Elder Harpy is better in literally any way that it can matter with the same stat cost. However, Elder Harpy's not actually that much better. It's just better. So it's a part of where you still get to draw the card. It's a little delayed, sure, but you still get to draw the card. It's still a 3/2 for 3 that draws you a card. And most of the time, the beast tag doesn't matter. Most of the time, the fact that this is an afterlife doesn't matter. If you have a choice between the two, obviously take the Harpy. But I'd still give this guy a 3.
Really, a 3?
Yeah. I mean, he trades with a dude and gets you a card. Like, that's exactly what value is.
I think I'd value this at like a 2.5. If I like,
All right, you're gonna quibble with me over half a point.
well, I'm just saying like I'd rather be playing a lot of like my Doom speakers and my bigger guys here for
Sure,
that
but
same
Doom Speaker,
cost.
I would
A
value it at
Brontis
least a three
even.
and a half,
You know
right?
what I mean? Yeah, but I mean I think 2.5 is fair for this card. That we have a direct comparison to another card which I think is a 3. So I think this can't be as good.
It's not as good, but I don't think it's a whole half a point worse. I think most of the time that the fact that Harpy draws you a card immediately doesn't really matter too much. The fact that it's a beast doesn't really matter too much. It's maybe a quarter of a point worse.
I don't know. I mean, the effect at late game for drawing a card immediately is really important.
Yeah, that's fair.